Elowen Hollow was a village tucked away. It hid between sleepy green hills. Sunlight there was always soft. The air in Elowen Hollow was quiet. You could hear the rustle of leaves. You could hear the sigh of the wind. It was a place where secrets felt safe, a place where magic felt real and very, very old. The magic of Elowen Hollow was not loud. It did not shout or sparkle for attention. It was a quiet magic. It lived in the moss on the stones. It drifted in the mist that settled in the valley. You could feel it in the way the wildflowers grew. They grew in patterns that seemed to tell stories. Stories only the wind could read aloud. This magic was woven into the fabric of the village. It was as much a part of Elowen Hollow as the crooked chimneys or the cobbled winding paths. Time in Elowen Hollow behaved differently. It did not rush or hurry, it strolled. It meandered like the little stream that ran beside the village. Some said time took naps in Elowen Hollow. Nearly every home in Elowen Hollow had such a clock, sometimes more than one. These clocks were not bought from a distant city. They were born in the village, crafted by hands that understood the Hollow's magic. Each clock was unique. A tall grandfather clock might stand in a hallway. Its face might show the phases of the moon. A small mantel clock might sit by a fireplace. Its chime might sound like distant bells, or like water dripping in a hidden cave. The sounds of these clocks filled the air, but it was not a noisy sound. It was a gentle symphony, a chorus of soft tick-tocks, of quiet whirs and clicks. It was the sound of time breathing. It was the sound of the village living. These sounds wove together. They created a blanket of peace, a comforting rhythm that cradled Elowen Hollow. At night, if you listened closely, it was like hearing many small hearts, all beating in a slow, steady rhythm, a rhythm of peace. These enchanted timepieces served a greater purpose. They were not just for knowing when to wake. Thorne Ellery was a man who seemed to be made of twilight and kindness. He was perhaps 60 years old or a little more. His hair was the colour of silver cobwebs. His eyes were the blue of a fading evening sky. They held a gentle light, a light that had seen many seasons pass. His hands were clever. They were gnarled like old tree roots, but they moved with a surprising grace. They knew the language of tiny springs and delicate gears. He was a quiet man. He lived a reclusive life, Thorne did. His workshop was his world. His clocks were his companions. He did not seek out company often, but he was not unfriendly. He was simply content in his quiet corner. He listened more than he spoke. He observed the way light fell, the way shadows danced, the way time itself seemed to breathe in his little shop. He understood that some of the best conversations were silent ones, held with the ticking hearts around him. Thorne Ellery's workshop was not easy to find. It was tucked away at the end of a winding lane, a lane that seemed to lead nowhere in particular. The building itself was old. Its stone walls were covered in thick green ivy. The roof sagged a little in the middle, like an old man sighing contentedly. A small, round window winked like a curious eye. Smoke, smelling faintly of wood and mystery, often curled from its chimney. It looked like a place from a storybook. Inside the workshop was a wonderland of time. It was dimly lit. Golden light from a few shaded lamps fell on workbenches. It glinted off brass and silver. Clocks were everywhere. Tall clocks stood like silent sentinels in the corners. Small clocks ticked merrily on crowded shelves. Clocks with curious faces, clocks with intricate carvings. Some were working perfectly. Their pendulums swung in hypnotic rhythm, others were quiet. One evening, the rain came to Elowen Hollow. It was a soft, persistent patter. It whispered against the window panes. The village grew even quieter under its spell. The cobbled streets glistened like dark mirrors. Most folk were indoors, warm by their fires. A young visitor named Liora found herself wandering. She was new to the outskirts of the hollow. The rain had caught her by surprise. She was drawn by a faint, warm light. It came from a small, round window. Liora hesitated before the old wooden door. The workshop looked ancient and mysterious. The rain urged her on. Liora stepped inside. Her eyes widened. The workshop was even more magical than she had imagined. So many clocks. Each one seemed to have a personality. Some looked wise and old. Others looked playful and bright. The air hummed with their gentle ticking. It was like stepping into a living dream. A dream made of wood and gears and time itself. She forgot about the rain. She forgot about being lost. She was captivated by this wondrous place. Thorne watched her with a quiet smile. As Liora looked around, her gaze fell upon one particular clock. It was not the largest, nor was it the shiniest. It sat on a low shelf, almost hidden in a shadowy corner. It was made of dark, polished wood. Wood that seemed to hold many secrets. Its face had no numbers. Instead, it was adorned with delicate carvings of swirling stars, crescent moons, winding paths that seemed to lead into mystery. It had a quiet, knowing presence. It drew her closer like a whispered secret. Liora's heart felt like a tiny bird fluttering in her chest. A clock that told stories. It was the most wonderful thing she had ever heard. She looked from the clock to Thorne. Her eyes were shining with awe. Could I hear a story?" she asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. She was afraid he might say no. Thorne Ellery simply nodded. His kind eyes crinkled at the corners. The air in the workshop seemed to grow still, expectant. He picked up the special key. It was slender and elegant, made of a silvery metal that seemed to glow faintly. He held it out to Liora. "You should be the one to wind it," he said. "The stories listen best to a curious heart." Liora reached out a trembling hand. The key felt surprisingly warm in her palm, as if the key itself held a secret. Then it began, not with a loud voice, but with a whisper that seemed to come from the clock itself. Or perhaps it bloomed directly in Liora's mind, like a forgotten memory surfacing. The light from the clock pulsed gently. It cast dancing shadows on the walls, shadows that seemed to form pictures that matched the unfolding story. Liora sat on a small stool Thorne had quietly placed for her. She was completely captivated, lost in the magic of the moment. The story was about a boy, a lonely boy who lived in a small cottage by the sea. He did not have many friends, but he had the stars. Every night he would watch them. He learned their names, he learned their patterns. He felt they were his silent companions. One day he decided to build a kite, not an ordinary kite. He wanted to make a kite that could reach the stars. He gathered fallen moonbeams. He wove in threads of twilight. He painted it with crushed berries that shone like distant nebulae. The boy worked for many weeks and created the perfect kite. The soft light from the Storyteller Clock slowly faded. The workshop returned to its gentle ticking quiet, but the silence felt different now. It was a silence filled with wonder, a silence that held the echo of the Stargazer's kite. Liora sat very still for a long moment. The story resonated within her. It was a simple tale, yet it felt profound. It was like a tiny, glowing seed planted in her heart, a seed of quiet magic and understanding. She looked up at Thorne. He was watching her with his kind, knowing smile. He did not ask if she liked the story. He could see it in her eyes. The world outside the workshop window seemed different to Liora now. The rain had softened to a gentle drizzle. The quiet village of Elowen Hollow, with its sleepy lanes and glowing windows, felt even more magical. It was not just a place of old houses and strange clocks. It was a place where stories lived and breathed, a place where dreams could take flight.